Welcome back to Story Time with Ophelia Immune. There she is. I just went jogging with my dad, who's 30 years older than me and still kicks my ass on running across country roads. Running is a strong word for what was happening. And you may ask yourself, why would anybody ever run without being chased? And you know what was chasing me? Anxiety, trauma, stress, mortality, so many things. And why would somebody with a connective tissue disorder called Ehlers-Danlos go jogging? I think there's something to be said, or something that I wonder about a lot is the idea of when bodies push themselves until they actually fall down. And I don't think that's a great plan in life, but I'm very curious. I'm very curious about that kind of exertion and what it takes to literally or metaphorically approach some kind of line of what really is everything I can do. And Barack Obama just texted me. Just a minute. Love you, buddy. Send. So, fresh from some exertion and checking in on my physical state in the world, let's have an action scene called The Battle. With all 18 girls in the back of the seatless van, it roared to life and lurched away from the holding cells. We jolted against each other, knobby knees and bony spines bouncing off of pointed chins and scrappy elbows. We shifted until we were all sitting on the floor instead of on someone else's lap. I struggled to keep a layer of cloth between me and my neighbors. We tried not to breathe too many of the diesel fumes as we went, huffing through our meager rags. We all hallucinated that we were on a horrendously long drive, our limbs cramping as we longed for our old, spacious dungeon quarters. But the van stopped after only a few minutes. The parking brake was applied with a sharp clank. We looked suspiciously at the walls and at each other, not knowing what to expect. The doors opened. We startled and clung to our tightly packed and angular mates. I fought not to let any of them hold on to my bearskin. Several hard, heavy objects were launched inside of the vehicle at us, hitting us sharply on the heads and our already battered bodies. And then one of the girls grabbed at a missile and squealed. Not in agony, but in joy. "It's bread!" She held up a loaf. "And it's not moldy!" Arms shot out like lightning and vice-like hands clamped stale carbohydrates to thrashing mouths. Someone shrieked that there were water jugs, too. The girls looked up and grabbed at them, taking long pulls and drooling happily after each drag. I rubbed a tingly spot where a jug had hit my hip. A small girl that I had held soggy bread for looked up from her chewing and noticed that I wasn't eating. She sheepishly handed me half of her loaf. I handed mine to Swan, who might need the extra about now, and sipped more water myself. No eye contact, only focus on the door and when it would open. The sounds of saws and hammers reverberated through the van walls while we waited. Men shouted. The familiar voices of Jeff and Pierre registered their opinions about the levelness and height of the stage, whether ramps or short stairs had worked better at previous auctions. They decided on a ramp. As they built it, the girls slowly drifted off into sleep, finally all full enough to sleep without the worry of using a dead body as a pillow. The doors swung open too early for anyone to twitch their eyelids in happy dreams. A leaden silence rested between our upturned faces and the boss. It was time for me to look strong. I held up my fist and shook it at the dirtbags. "You'll never take us alive!" It worked. The boss pointed at me. She's first. No other brave girls stepped forward, so Pierre just grabbed the ones that looked best. As I was led off the stage, I saw Swan lying limply in the back with her head cocked off to one side and her tongue dangled out the corner of her bread-smeared mouth. She leaned against the thoughtful little girl who had offered me part of her bread. She patted Swan's hand, but leaned away from her runny nose. There was a large crowd gathering around the finished stage. There were more people than I had seen in one space, maybe ever. Certainly more people than had been at our picnic. More than lived in the squatters' building. More than had seen me in years. I checked my arms, which were still light and fishy. The people were loud and busy, checking their watches and the flyers that they held in their hands. They had numbers pinned onto their sleeves, and they turned their heads from side to side, standing on their tiptoes to look around. They nodded their hats to each other. The few women in the crowd held their chins highly aloft and bobbed curtly to each other. They fanned themselves with their shawls and sipped bubbly substances from mugs that they clanked brashly together, spilling hideous wet streaks onto the blacktop. Each of these devourers still had a pulse. Pierre lined us up against the back wall, me first. I squinted in the blinking lights. A short, weaselly man pulled me aside to wrap frayed wires around a cord deep inside of the bricks. The lights grew brighter. He scurried away. I could see the stage across the river of bobbing human heads. Jeff held a long piece of rope in his hands. He took the short end from the coil and motioned for me to turn sideways. He crouched, and I felt the vine looping and tightening around my ankles. I worried that it would rub my skin down to show zombie blood, but Jeff moved to the girl standing beside me. I felt her head lean against my raggy shoulder blades as he tied her. Jeff went up and down the line, tying all of our legs together, a long string of shackled wife material. We were all about to get married, purchased. Absurd. I wonder how many of the buyers lived in cars. I wondered how many of them could actually take care of another person. I almost laughed. A snort escaped. Pierre glared at me. He grabbed my wrists and held them together in front of him. He bound them brutally with very narrow twine. I winced and tried to smudge away my leaking black goo. I tried to hide it under the frays of my shirt. The boss saw me and hurried over. "Hey!" He slapped Pierre in the back of the head. "Don't use that cord. It marks their skin, dummy. We want them ready to go as soon as they're purchased. Use the soft rope." A man in a tall silken top hat touched the boss's elbow. The boss spun around and grasped the man's hand, firmly, in a handshake. They walked away together, chatting and smiling, humming and tapping a silver-headed lion cane. Pierre scoffed but cut the twine and replaced it with softer rope, twisted out of the never-ending rag supplies. I found myself waiting in line with all of the other girls. We towed at the ground, occasionally glancing at the crowd and standing very still, counting down the time until the next unmoldy meal. It might come as a reward for being ready to go on the car ride home with our new husbands. Or it might not come for days, as hazing by the other wives that he owned. There's no way to tell. Perhaps the older, more established wives would have been nice to the girls tonight, take pity on the helpless newcomers until they were strong enough to be sent off to the markets the next day, unarmed, to retrieve the heavy goods for the household. If they had done all of their chores well, they might have eventually allowed to start eating enough to bear children. Hopefully a daughter that could be sold or produce more daughters. Sooner or later, another new girl would have come and taken the lowest spot on the breeding totem. The boss slammed his gavel down on a makeshift crate podium, and the auction began. He leaned into a cracking microphone. The Weasley man fiddled with some knobs and a board of buttons, and the boss's voice came through more clearly. "Welcome, welcome, one and all. Ladies and gentlemen, you have come to the best auction in town. We have what you need. Are you ready? Ready to move on with your family? Ready to move on with your future? Ready to thrive?" The crowd cheered and clapped, bouncing up and down in the pairs of matching shoes with excitement. "We have all of the high-quality, willing wives that you need. They've been collected out from underneath the noses of families who did not know what a gold mine they had. And here they are, ready to join you, right now, right here. Do you want to meet them? What do you say?" The crowd cheered more loudly, craning their necks to see if we were on the stage yet. Pierre kicked us into motion. I stared at him angrily. Jeff tugged at our ropes until we took a step forward. It was hard to align our steps and coordinate the sad shuffling of 18 girls headed for sale. I led them the best I could in a slow snake around the left, past the crowd, up the narrow ramshackle ramp to the stage. I felt a splinter enter my bare foot. Shouldn't the buyers be more concerned with the quality of their precious ragged goods? A man decided to test the merchandise. A hand cupped my backside and trailed fingers up my leg. I cricked my neck to see who it was. A ranger. He turned to the crowd, who looked at him smiling. He nodded emphatically, beaming his approval with a thumb high in the air. Yes, yes, very fine. An exemplary building block for any family, the boss chimed in. Everyone chuckled and clapped. I clenched my jaw and moved past the boss to the podium to the far right side of the stage. I stopped, and all of the girls behind me halted in tow. We faced the crowd. They murmured to each other and pointed up and down our line, speculating about which of us they could afford. Girls who hadn't smiled in ages forced their lips to stretch out across their faces to attract a nice owner. I clenched harder and stood up straighter. I strained my neck and looked for Donnie. Would he try to stand up and claim me before I could be sold? Would he walk me away on a leash instead of getting sold to someone with a van and ruin our entire plan? I had high hopes that when he tried to claim me, the boss would make him at least bid and pay to walk me towards a reasonable ambush point. He would certainly like my lighter hair. I couldn't see him anywhere. He wasn't there. I needed to focus on being sold first now, to someone rich with a van that could be parked at the front of the alley, blocking all the others behind it. The boss cut my wrist bindings with his penknife. He paused, rumbling into my ear. Behave. It's for your own good, bird. I was torn between spitting hatefully at the crowd and finishing our plan. I made fists with my hands, but let my arms fall to my sides politely. I held my chin high, and when I caught the eye of the man on the top hat, he grinned. I looked away. I looked only at the opposite building above the crowd's head. Eye contact was too much to ask. Here we have a girl in her prime, the boss announced, shining an electric torch on me. Of excellent health, quite strong, very nimble, in her childbearing years, stands up straight, smart enough to know what's good for her. He rested a hand in my neck. She will represent your family mightily. May require some breaking, but once broken will be the shining centerpiece of your fine workforce, which we are honored to help you build. I will start the bidding at 1,500 coins. Hands flew into the air and into my line of sight. I had to raise my eyes higher on the buildings, over the hands reaching for me, wanting to grope and own my muscles. The boss drove my price higher and higher, touting greater and greater of my submissive yet capable qualities. Fewer and fewer hands shot into the air each time, until finally there was only one hand, the highest bidder. My stomach sloshed and threatened to rebel. Tears that I imagined to be gray-green and ruining my bleach job ran down my cheeks. I lowered my head. Coins jingled. A hand grabbed my wrist and pulled me down off of the stage. The man in the top hat stood before me. The boss bent down to cut the leash and still connected me to the girls behind me, but he left my feet knotted close to each other so that I would have to hobble. You did well, bird. Good luck, he said, and gestured for the top-hatted man to take me away. Oh, speaking of Ehlers-Dan, let's reposition a little, shall we? Close enough. I did away with the external microphone that didn't seem to be working. Top Hat guided me to the alleyway with one hand on my lower back. I glanced up and saw Swan against the back wall, tied to the end of her line of girls, feigning lightheadedness but staying firmly on her feet. Jeff pushed her up against the wall. My tears stopped flowing. I needed to focus on not tripping and locating the trash bins in which we had stashed our weapons and supplies 2 days ago. And where was Uncle Donnie? The Weasley man was standing shiftily near a valet stand full of keys, waiting for us. Top Hat showed Weasley his receipt, and Weasley scurried away. The trash cans were exactly where they were supposed to be, exactly where we'd left our bottle bombs and bigger blades, safely out of sight, all eyes drawn to the bright paper flyers on every wall, advertising our purchase. Weasley returned after leaking more hot tears. I find a lot of things in my own writing that give me pause. Weasley returned after I leaked more hot tears, parking my new owner's yellow van at the front of the line, exactly as planned. Behind us was another buyer holding the arm of the girl who had been sold after me. Weasley darted away with a new set of keys to retrieve the second vehicle of the caravan, while Top Hat gave me a boost into his. The valet would line up the other buyers' vans as they purchased their wives, luxury parking for those who bought humans. It was going to be their own downfall. I looked over the soft mattresses and blankets of Top Hat's van. There was a table full of water bottles and fresh fruit. There was no screen between the back and the driver's seat. I eyed the path to the front. It was going to be easy to hijack his van and trap all of the other buyers' vans behind it. "I'll be back soon." He slammed the doors to go purchase another girl. Fresh fruit? Swan would kill for a taste of some. I would try to steal a nice apple for her on my way out. But first I need to get myself unbound. I need my tools. I steady my legs against the mattress. I stretch my fingers away from my wrists and wiggle the tips back at myself. I overextend my elbows, stretching and flexing my forearms. I feel one of the scalpels slip under my skin. It presses outward slightly. The skin spreads thin around the sharp point and then breaks into a short tear. I ease it out and use it to cut the other razor free. I dab my dripping arms on the horrid dress and press the torn skin together until it holds. I hear a second van parking behind my owners, and then a third. The caravan is lining up. If Swan is sold last, we'll have them surrounded in flame. Where is Uncle Donnie? I hoped he was in the crowd and just didn't recognize me. I pictured him burning with the vans. I swiped through the rope tying my feet. I squatted against the wall and arranged the rope around my ankles to look like any casual door opener, like I was still tied. I took huge sips from free water bottles. When Top Hat returned with his second girl and lifted her in before leaving again, I handed her the fresh water as well. She sipped it greedily. She ate an entire apple, seeds, core, stem, and all. "Hello," I said. She frowned at me. "What's your name?" I asked. She scowled, not willing to even speak out of the boss's cells. "Don't worry," I told her. "I'll get you out of here." She settled into the soft blankets, facing away from me. "Come here and hold still," I said, leaning over her with my scalpel poised to cut her ankle ropes. She screamed. The back doors rattled and then opened. A squatted, meekly Top Hat appeared. Arms first, and then his face, grumpy. "Everything okay?" "Yes, sir." The now quiet second girl bowed her head to her feet. He hoisted a third girl into the back and slammed the doors on us again. "You!" "Pardon me." Human life. He hoisted a third girl into the back and slammed the doors on us again. How many was he going to buy? Looked like as many as he could stow. The girls and I glanced at each other uneasily. "I'm just going to cut your ankle ropes." I held up the scalpel again. "Why?" asked the third girl. Did the master tell you to? Yeah, sure. I nodded and leaned for her ropes. Once freed, they stretched their legs out in front of them and munched contentedly on the fruit that they dipped luxuriously into the water. We did real good, one of them said to the other. I know, she chewed an orange slice. He must be hella rich. When Top Hat bought the fourth girl, he handed her to us and then announced, Get comfortable. Auction's almost over. We're going home. He shut the back doors and plodded around the outside to the driver's seat. I waited on the balls of my feet as he slid in and patted his pocket for his keys. He dropped them to the floor like an amateur, picked them up, fumbled for the correct one. He found it and held it to the ignition. He would never have survived on the road. He was terrible at being a driver. Just as he slid the key in, before he could give it a turn, I raised one of my blades to his throat and pressed it there. I slithered into the front of the van. That's just about far enough, I growled, hunching my back against the van ceiling, the biggest, meanest cat I could be. We're not going anywhere. Not in your van. He was stunned and held his head awkwardly high to avoid the sharp point of my scalpel. The girls in the back were baffled. You sit still, completely still, I ordered the full-grown man, twice my size. Come here, I motioned to the newest girl. I am going to get rid of your ankle ropes. She scooted hesitantly towards me and let me cut her ropes away with my left hand, while I kept my eyes trained on my right at our owner's throat. What is she doing? One of the other girls whispered to another. I don't know. She's crazy. Don't help her, or you'll get a beating too. I rolled my eyes and moaned again. My torso rattled with zombie noises that I had stifled all day. Top Hat's eyes got wider. The girls in the back stared even more intently at the mattress and blankets around their feet. A horn behind us blared, then another. The other vans behind us were full and ready to go. A few more minutes and Swan would be ready to threaten her driver in her van as well. Top Hat's fingers itched to turn his keys and elbow me in the face, but I bore my stare into the side of his face. I broke his skin ever so slightly with my knife to show him that I was serious. We're getting out. He sighed, almost as resigned as the girls in the back of his van. Okay, he took off his top hat off of his head and set it on the dashboard. What would you have me do, m'lady? I would have you open your door very slowly. We are going to step around the back, open the back door, let the girls out, and then you are going to come with me while I step over to the trash can at the side of the alley. The girls in the back looked at me, just for a second, horrified to be suddenly implicated in my plan, but they kept quiet and still, always placating, finding other things to put their eyes on. The man reached for his door handle without moving his neck a centimeter. Go ahead, open it. He nudged the door open with the toe of his unscuffed shoe. We slid out onto the pavement as one. He stepped more quickly than I thought he would. He slipped swiftly to the back of the van and unlatched the doors. The girls huddled as far from the open doors as they could. Okay, Top Hat spoke quietly. Where's this trash can of yours? I guided him with the tip of the tiny blade under his Adam's apple, nicking the skin ever so slightly. Watch it, he murmured, striding rapidly where I had pointed. I reached behind the trash can and grabbed a glass bottle filled with alcohol and stolen kerosene and siphoned gas. The fluid-soaked rag hung off the top and slimed my fingers. A bulky and irate man stepped out of the second van and banged on his hood with his fist. What the hell is going on? What is this? I lit my Molotov cocktail and held it aloft. Top Hat stood calmly behind me, watching. He ran one hand through his hair, readjusting the silken waves, and cleared his throat while he tucked his white glove into his breast pocket. Well, said the man without his top hat, I think that we are being ambushed by two little girls. At the other end of the alley, I saw another flame spike high into the air. It was Swan. Her cocktail splattered against the roof of the last van in line. Girls stumbled out of it, screaming and staggering in all directions. I held my bomb above my head and grinned slyly, showing the men my rotten gums. Stallion fast, Top Hat grabbed my wrist and held it tightly. I'm a good guy, he said. I was going to take you and these girls to a safe house that I own. Hit the second guy's van and load all of the girls into mine. I'll save them. Yeah, right. I'll prove it. He took the cocktail out of my hand, lit it with a match from his own pocket, walked it over to the owner of the second van, and dropped the Molotov cocktail on the hood of the vehicle. What are you doing? You bastard! The man took a swing at Top Hat. Top Hat grinned, ducked, and clocked him squarely on the jaw. The flabbergasted man stumbled irately backwards and raised his fists. Top Hat pulled a blade of his own from inside his jacket pocket and removed the silk cloth that was covering it. It glinted as the man charged him. Top Hat easily dodged a hasty punch and knocked him soundly with the butt of his knife. The man sat down dizzy, oozing red blood onto his cashmere sweater, which Mom would have hated to have seen ruined. Stay here, Top Hat instructed the girls who were still sitting in the back of his van. I'll take care of you. They nodded. No other hope had ever crossed their minds. I reached for my hammer and my next Molotov. Have any more of those? Top Hat smoothed his dark sideburns against his unblemished cheeks. I gave him another and took up my last. It was cold against my palm, but cast a large shadow of heat as soon as it was lit from my own pack of matches. Top Hat paced one side of the van, and I the other. He punched another van owner in the round belly and launched the cocktail at the roof of the third. Stepping around the doubled-over owner, he reached for the van's back doors and wrenched them open. I used my hammer on the next owner's hand, and then the lock of the fourth van. I stuck my head in. The girls cowered. Okay, I said. All clear. Hop out of this van and get into the first one, the yellow one up front. You heard her, an older girl in the back piped up. Pile out! They trusted me ever so slightly more than the flames after I had fed them bread, and they crept towards the opening, slowly at first, and then as quickly as if they had eaten every day of their lives. None looked back at the girl who had given them their orders to listen to me. The other girls ran off, but she moved like a seasick snail. She waved me away and strained to roll her hands onto her knees. I can crawl, she said. Go save the others. I glanced over my shoulder. Flames shot out of the vans behind us, and I could hear Swan whooping a high, happy pitch. Girls were running in every direction, dodging their new owners to crawl into Top Hat's nicer, yellow cage on wheels. Come on, I insisted, grabbing the snail's arm. Let's get you out of here. The Top Hat helped another girl who couldn't walk anymore, much less sprint, even with her adrenaline pumping. We left the exhausted girl slumped in his van, panting together like one big litter of puppies. I counted them. Only 13. Where were the other 3? A mangled owner who had already been punched by somebody tried to wave his receipt at us, shouting about which girls he owned. He offered me 10 coins to return to just his wives. I laughed and stepped out of his reach. I felt a hand on my rag dress. It spun me around. I expected Donnie, but a large woman with golden dentures shook me by my collar. I tried to stop laughing, but the harder she shook me, the harder I laughed. I could see Swan standing on the roof of a van that wasn't burning yet, dueling with the boss, her fire poker against his shiny cane. It slashed furiously and his cane shattered. I snorted. The woman shook me harder. Stop laughing, you little wench! Stop laughing! I could feel my arm rattling with the last cocktail in my grip, wobbling the fluid inside dangerously close to the burning rag on the outside. Her jowls rocked with the same tide of the fleshy pistons that held me. I'll keep you. I can kill the things that I own, you little bitch. Always a bitch to everyone. I tried to slur between my slamming teeth. Be careful, or we'll explode. Stop shaking me. But it was too late. The last Molotov cocktail flew out of my fingers and slammed against the tire by our feet. Glass shards flew everywhere. The woman's shawl caught on fire. She dropped me and ran away, flames trailing behind her. I could see Jeff and Pierre cornered by a girl who was threatening them with a burning hunk of van seat that she swung high above her head. I hoped that she wouldn't faint mid-swing. I giggled and stood up. I looked at my arms, black rivers trailing down past my wrists. I picked a shard out of my forearms and flicked it at the Weasley man who was skittering past. Swan popped out of nowhere and tripped him. She hit him on the bottom with her poker, and as he got back up, squealed and ran away. She tried to high-five me, but I pulled my bleeding arms away and looked to the only van that wasn't burning, the yellow one in front. Top Hat collected the 14th girl, discarded her flaming cushion, and scanned the alley for any more girls he could pop into the back. Seeing none, he came to me. 2 had run off on their own. More power to them. "Do you want to get in?" he asked. I shook my head. Swan raised her poker at his double-breasted vest. "Who are you?" He put out a thick palm. "I'm Carl." "And you ladies are?" "Not in need of a ride." "You better be for real." I growled at him. "We'll find you. We'll catch you if you're lying. You'll be deader than I am." "It's real." He bowed like a silly chicken. "You're welcome any time. It's in the Park District, near the old wharf. Come and see." "Oh, we will come and check up on you," I warned him. Ranger whistles began to blow. I ducked and dodged a can of tear gas. "I'm Swan. That's Ophelia," Swan yelled over the din. I closed the back doors around the heap of shaking girls. Top Hat ducked into his driver's seat, dusting off his pinstripes. The van grumbled alive, spitting smog at my feet, turning them soot black instead of bleached white or zombie gray and green. I smiled. Top Hat plowed through the crowd of rangers, van grill first. We followed behind his bumper, skittering past the coughing rangers and confused onlookers who had all started to choke on the drifting pepper spray. They held their arms out in front of their bodies, waving at the clouds and pawing at each other. They looked just like the zombies as I grabbed the hacking Swan by her sleeve, and we made a run for it. They did it. They attacked a caravan.